welcome to the third Age Babylon 5 podcast. We are all three of us again, three Europeans watching Babylon 5 for the first, the second, and the up team's time. And we are here to talk about the episode Divided Loyalties. And as you can tell, everybody's having a lot of fun. It's been a little while since it was all three of us together, so recording is just a nice time. But as usual, we will start with a little bit of an episode synopsis, then our introduction question, and then the main part of our discussion. I have the order right?
Yes.
Okay, so do you want to give us a synopsis?
In this episode, the telepath Lyta Alexander returns to Babylon 5 and has the information for our main cast that there might be a traitor on the station, but it's not just an ordinary traitor. It is someone who has an implanted sleeper personality provided by the PsiCorps, and she has the password, the code, to give telepathically to anyone to see whether they are this traitor or not. So we see our main cast dealing with this information, thinking about whether or not to conduct these kind of scans or this kind of transmissions. We also get more information about Susan, about her relationship friendship thing that she has going on with Talia, as well as her very personal reason for why she is so brutally against being scanned ever, because she actually might be a very weak telepath as well. And yeah, the big reveal, of course, Talia is our traitor that who we find out towards the end of the episode. Then what I also find important, what we probably have to discuss, are a lot of little character interactions. For example, there are a few very informative and cute interactions between Sheridan and Dylan, and I think a few more. Yes, I think that's it.
That's complete, yes. Wonderful. In this case, we do have, of course, a little bit of an introductory question. And last time we had our discussion about the Plague episode, we thought, as a little pick-me-up, because things ended on a bit of a sour note, it would be fun to take a little musical detour and talk about what is the kind of music that we would like to take to Babylon 5. And you had at least one more artist that you wanted to mention, and of course Meike didn't have a chance to answer this question at all, so she will get the stage as well.
Yeah, so I should start?
Yes, sure.
Okay. Yeah, so what I just forgot to mention, maybe because, in this situation that I thought of when thinking about the station, she was not really present in my mind, but was Emily Autumn, because I just cannot go anywhere without her books or her music. So although I don't really see myself being in space or being in a transporter or something, or being in hyperspace and wanting to listen to historical fiction, gothic rock, I still think I should take her with me because she means a lot to me. That's just what I wanted to add.
Okay.
Yeah, well, on my part, it's a bit problematic because the type of music I listen to is really, really mixed. There are very few consistent artists in my playlists. I mean, I would say Pink is one of those that reappear now and again, but overall, there's really mixed stuff. Also in the genre, it's not like I would say this is the type of music I listen to, because I think I'm sort of all over the place depending on my mood and what I want to listen to. Therefore, I guess it would be a whole lot of mixtapes, like the old-fashioned way that I would take with me. And yeah, depending on my mood, that would be what I would take. Probably forgetting half of it on my way, and then being sad that I didn't take X, Y, and Z. So.
I like that you would take it kind of Guardians of the Galaxy style, with a little Walkman and like your own little cassette tapes that you have like hands written on, all the weird-ass titles that you put on there.
It seems like this is at least partially a thing again, because I've seen a few posts, not quite sure if it was Instagram or wherever, but where people were like posting Walkmans and not the old kind of stuff. You can also buy cassette tapes from new albums out now.
Of course. It's like vinyl. It's something that people enjoy, have nostalgic memories of. So it's not going away anytime soon. It's great.
Well, I don't have a pencil, but I'm just saying this.
Excellent. No, in this case, I think we are well equipped to dive into our main episode, and as usual, this means a little bit of first impressions, and maybe we just finished starting up the episode again, so maybe you can give some very fresh first impressions before we ask Meike, as usual, to give hers.
Yes, I have to say that I said sorry.
That you always say that. That's right.
My brain is just a little bit overloaded at the moment. Oh.
It's once again like one of these late summer afternoons, so it's very hot and we are not in the best shape. So you might be able to tell.
Yeah. What I wanted to say was what I wanted to say was that season 2 has been feeling kind of long because we've taken our time with it, but I've been, ever since the half of this season, I've been teasing that the moment where Babylon 5 actually had me and where it actually got more and more interesting, that is coming closer, and I think this is one of the episodes where it starts to show. What I also really like is the scenes where Lyta arrived, because they very much open up a lot of this potential that the PsiCorps has. I really feel like in classical sci-fi, I feel like I'm in 1984, and I really like how her story is started here. It has a very strong atmosphere. And yes, I think that the problem or the ability of the PsiCorps that is revealed here will convince the last person that the institution is problematic, but also that the skills that humans have nowadays are just terrifying, because that really adds a new level. You're not just completely transparent to them. They can just really mess with you and change you. So yeah, I think it's an episode with a very, very strong atmosphere that really gets into the juicy part of Babylon 5, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, on my part, I would totally agree on that. I'm not quite sure how to phrase this, but it's this little things that now where you feel okay, shit again hit Babylon 5, and it's in a way that everyone is in danger, not in the kind of you will be shut down, but yeah, you can be revealed as someone who is trying to do something against PsiCorps, the government, whatever. And I really like to see them, the main cast, coming together. I mean, in this way of, okay, we really have a problem here that is not necessarily Babylon 5 being attacked or some aliens going rampant, but yeah, it's the personal problem, and their work so far is in great danger. And yeah, that Lyta comes back in this episode. I was really happy to see this because I really loved her in the movie. And I'm really happy she still has reddish hair. On the other hand, yes, the plot twists in this episode were obvious in a way to me, but it was still satisfying to watch it because of the way it was told.
Very nice. So also for you, the atmosphere is like one of the stronger parts of this episode. Nice,
Yeah.
nice. Well, I had to think about this a little bit, but ultimately for me, this is, I think, one of the first times I feel like we see JMS at his absolute best in this show. Not necessarily in a way that I say, oh, this episode tells the best story ever in Babylon 5. I think it does get a little bit clunky and maybe even, like you say, Meike, obvious in a way. But this is one of these times where JMS has to deal with a lot of kind of the BS that a TV show has to deal with like people leaving, people coming back on board, production issues and this kind of stuff. And he's just pulling all the registers to make this work nonetheless. And I think you really start to see how everything that is set up across the first 1.5 seasons here clicks together like clockwork. As we were rewatching this episode, I was kind of struck by the fact that we have this entire initial sequence of Lyta comes back to the station, gathers all the people, talks to them about the PsiCorps and their experiments and the secret base is mentioned and stuff. And every single thing that is talked about is either covered by a flashback or already established in a previous episode. Like, all of these things are already kind of known. So everything in this episode feels to me a little bit like the logical conclusion of all the things that we've established so far. And that is just very satisfying to watch. Not necessarily a big plot twist in the sense of, oh, I didn't expect that. It's more like, oh, yeah, now that you say it, it all actually makes a lot of sense. And yeah, that was just very fun to see. Okay. But before we get into like all the big government conspiracies and stuff that are happening, Layla, you already mentioned that we probably have to start talking about a lot of the small things that happen. And the episode opens with, or doesn't quite open, but very early on has a small thing, which is there's newspapers on Babylon 5, but they're custom printed to order because we are in the future. And I'm just going to start us off by saying, as a technology bit, this is exactly what you mentioned, Meike. People still liking Walkman and cassette tapes. Of course, the newspaper is something that is nice to read. It's tactile, it's great. So it's not going to disappear, but it's also not going to be shipped to Babylon 5 in big packages because that's impractical. We just print it on demand. I really love that idea.
I mean, overall, it feels like a natural development if you don't get rid of it because it can be done in a digital way. Why not print it on demand? Because I mean, we're no longer are in the time where where every letter has to be put in a machine at once, and therefore, it feels like a natural development, especially from the time this series was developed.
It is kind of aged because there is no algorithm telling you what's gonna be in the paper. You can still choose this on your own. That's like the key difference that's missing.
Yes, but it is still kind of close.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, ideally, the algorithm just learns what you like and gives it to you, and then you tell it, a machine, what you want to have.
Yes, that's right.
But yeah, I think also that it's... I was thinking when I was watching that scene, I was thinking of, from a 90s perspective, was this super dystopic? Like, was this a scene where that was showing that people kind of pick the topics that they want to interact with and kind of also try to avoid some kind of views, or was it not? Was it just a cool bit of technology? I couldn't decide really, because for me it didn't sound super dystopic, actually. No. But I wasn't sure how that seemed from this older perspective, what that looked like.
I just had right now a really quick idea. Because I've written down what Delenn later says to Sheridan about how it's dealt on Mimba. You've been told what you need to know and no more, which is overall really interesting thing. But if you put this in reflection on today, where an algorithm gives you what he thinks you're interested in, and nothing more. Just the things where you said, okay, this, and this is what I'm interested in, and therefore I get this information and everything that the algorithm thinks is suited for me. So, and maybe this is uninteresting for others, but I find this really funny right now.
No, I think it's a very valid point, especially because Delenn deals with this in the way that is usually the recommended way, right? Like, if you have this feeling that, I might be kind of stuck in my own bubble, the best way to deal with that is get somebody else's perspective on this. And so you start ordering the Eye on Minbari from the human perspective and see all the weird stuff that we are writing about them. And I wonder with Delenn especially if this is kind of a reaction of hers to everything we saw her going through earlier this season. She has kind of noticed that, humans might be thinking very differently about her entire transformation than she anticipated. So maybe she has started reading human news on Minbar just to kind of get a better feeling for what the opinion actually is. So maybe she is getting a bit more savvy in these kinds of things, which I think it's great to see. Other than that, I think also like standing by this newspaper stand and talking about gossip and stuff, this entire episode through, I feel like Sheridan and Delenn are just developing the most stereotypical like high school teenage romance, and this is a very good starting point for this. We're just kind of awkwardly having these meet cutes, and it's kind of neat.
But yeah, maybe before we dig into this later part with their meeting, I think the next part that appears is that secret information is collected on, I'm not quite sure where, because I couldn't, my recording didn't let me go back without crashing my PC, therefore I didn't try it again. Maybe you can help me out there.
We are somewhere on Mars. I don't quite remember. It's like one of the big domes where the main colonies are, and one of the big plains and craters that there are. We could probably look that up, but it's not that important.
Okay. The important part of that is said is that we see, or we see is the data crystal that's handed down, and tell Babylon 5 that there is danger within. And I really like this phrase because I mean it's like the most scariest thing anyone can tell you, because within means in the circle where you think it is safe to be yourself, there is someone who is not on your side.
Absolutely. What I also really like is that we are getting more establishment of how important Babylon 5 is in the Babylon 5 universe, because we've been talking about this a lot. Like for some species, it's kind of a backwater. For others, it's like this big opportunity to make contact. And now we see like for the Martian resistance, it is like the hub of possible like authority that can be resisting because it's so far away from Earth. And I don't think we've seen a lot of that. And it's like a nice reminder that, you know, when Sheridan is worried about the state of the Earth Alliance, he is sitting in his armchair behind a desk and making government decisions about that. But we know the resistance on Mars has been a lot more hands-on. We know from season 1 that there has been active fighting going on. And so, yeah, if they are smuggling data, people are losing their lives. And so the stakes are immediately very high. So as a viewer, of course, I'm inclined to also root for them a lot and be very worried about this ominous warning of danger from within. I think the last of the introductory scenes that we get is what you already mentioned, Layla, that 2 years into them meeting and absolutely hating each other's guts, Talia and Susan have finally warmed up to each other a little bit. And we get
we have a little scene before that, and that is Sheridan and Garibaldi having a secret meeting on the toilet, which is honestly I found really funny to see what a toilet looks like on B5, at least the men's restroom, and yeah, it's a bit like I mean the important bit in there is that they are planning to let Talia in their little circle, and in a few days, which is, yeah, holy moly, you really, really got lucky this time, because that could have gone so wrong.
I think this might also be the indicator that Sheridan loves collecting conspiracies, but maybe he is not the best at doing a conspiracy, because, yeah, I don't see any reason why she would be a problem for us. I always found her quite trustworthy, so we should definitely invite her into our circle. Like, all the plot of this episode beside, that feels like a very flimsy way of deciding who you want to include in your, you know, somebody assassinated the president kind of conspiracy. It's
yeah, and on the other hand, we have Garibaldi talking later about Lyta, and that he has a gut feeling where Sheridan is reminding him on the, I think it was his right-hand man that shot him. Therefore, yeah, it is Sheridan in this case is a bit two-sided, because with himself he doesn't really question this kind of working, but on the other hand he is calling Garibaldi out on it.
But I mean, Garibaldi himself is also the same. Like, Garibaldi is absolutely paranoid about everyone, but, you know, does have this weakness of putting his trust in people and then being very strong in that. So, I mean, yeah, it's just one of these flaws that our characters have.
So it always changes depending. it always changes depending on the person involved. For one person, seems to be a flaw. On the other side, it can be a strength. So.
But also, I mean, you have to think about how do I pick people for such a conspiracy, and that's kind of, I mean, what kind of real categories could there even be?
Well, for one, it's all the Pakbara you run into on the men's bathroom. They are automatically in there because they listened in on you. And then, with women, it's much more difficult because you meet them not in the bathroom. So they have to have this discussion about Talia. It makes complete sense to me.
No, because, I mean, for example, I would think it would always be a bit difficult or a bit critical, actually, to have someone in who is part of PsiCorps, because you, even before you had this threat going on, you really have this feeling that you're not completely aware of what PsiCorps is capable of, and anyone can be corrupted by them. But then again, it would also be super useful to have someone who knows what is going on in PsiCorps. So there are two sides to this, and then of course, if you are not letting someone in who is part of PsiCorps because the worries weigh too much in the decision, then you are basically excluding someone from whatever, from basically for how they were born, because they don't really have a way out of PsiCorps. It is a very difficult decision, I think, and that's kind of the problem when you are working on that level against your own government. You have to focus so much on a fucking gut feeling, and we see in this episode on a meta level, actually, we can say that this episode shows us, humanity now has the problems that the gut feeling can be more fucked over than ever before. I mean,
especially if you look at Talia, her development so far. I mean, with Ironheart, with everything else that, she was. I don't know. Remember the episode where she was protecting this group where they were giving.
You're speaking about the rogue telepath railroad where Franklin was smuggling them out and stuff. Yeah,
exactly. Where she's helping them. Where you, as you were watching this, had the feeling of, okay, she is realizing the problematic of PsiCorps and maybe even developing this feeling of they are not like PsiCorps is mother, PsiCorps is father, what she later almost chants, and but you had in your mind, okay, she is slowly going over to what we would consider the better side.
I mean, the other challenge there is also that already our crew is so deep into the conspiracy iceberg, right? Because yes, they gotten to the point where Talia has actively worked against the PsiCorps, so we are at least sure she is critical of the PsiCorps. But then if we introduce her to the inner circle of our conspiracy, we are also telling her the government is also bad and the president was assassinated and the PsiCorps is also at fault for that, which is like a few steps more even to get her in there. And I think this is where also for them, the hesitation might not just be, can we trust her on this? It's also kind of, her entire world has already been shattered. How much good is she going to be if she gets a psychotic break because we tell her everything else is just as bad? I think it makes things difficult for everyone involved. But I mean, ultimately for Sheridan, it's also this thing, like, how do you not become like your enemy, right? If he goes completely against gut feeling and says, I want to build a system where trust doesn't exist and I control everyone completely, well, that's ultimately what PsiCorps has been doing. That's why we got into this mess in the first place. So of course he has to at some point just kind of jump over his own shadow and build something based on trust, and that's always difficult.
Maybe trust is the key word for what is with Ivanova and Talia by now. Layla, you want to go there?
Yeah, maybe in this part, let me ask, you said that the plot twists were not such a big surprise. What gave them away?
Well, at first, with Ivanova and Talia, where they were meeting, were talking with each other, and later they had a girls' night because of the malfunctions in Talia's quarters.
Mild
on one
corrections, yes. Sure.
yes, on one hand, I thought, oh, this is convenient, but yeah, well, I pushed it away because there are a lot of things that happen. I would feel to be convenient just for plot's sake. But the focus here to show, okay, this connection is made. This is important now. It on one hand it feels quite quickly compared to what we've seen so far. I mean, there was a lot of non-interaction shown between them. I mean, for how many episodes Talia wasn't there? The development kind of was kind of missing. I mean, there were there were signs that they would start to get along, but the whole process of connection was missing. Therefore, I was a bit skeptical of this, and the point where Lyta appeared and was telling, we have like a sleeper here. I was like, it has to be Talia because just of the circumstances. I mean, who would they which character would have been in a position where he got this alternate personality implanted in that? I couldn't imagine anyone. And honestly, I was trusting Lyta there too much, but because of her actions and interactions in the movie, I felt like she was a trustworthy character, and therefore wasn't thinking that she was doing a scam or anything there.
I mean, this is where we are right back at the question of trust, right? In the beginning, Sheridan and Garibaldi discussing trusting Talia, and that's already a difficult question. Now Lyta suddenly shows up. Sheridan has never met this woman before, and now she asks him to put all his trust in her. That's an interesting mirroring right there. We will have to talk about this twist maybe at the end a little bit, because it's interesting that you can't imagine any other character being a candidate for control, because ultimately, like in the beginning, there was a completely different plan for how the storyline was supposed to play out. So that's interesting, but we will see if we can get to that. But if we're talking about the big twists, how about Ivanova being a telepath then?
Yeah, wait, we have to. Sorry. Before you say something to that, we have to remind the listeners that I think even one season ago, Meike had this theory even before the end of our discussions of season 1, that might actually be the case. And I remember that episode when we talked about that and how we looked at each other and kind of worried because we didn't want to give it away on our faces. But yeah, you were very quick on that. So maybe for those who remember watching that discussion, or for those who haven't, I don't remember exactly what episode that was, sadly. But it was... definitely Meike had this idea very, very early. That's kind of impressive.
It is.
So how did it feel to be right?
Honestly, I completely forgot about that.
That's a good part for us. If I accidentally spoil something, there's a good chance Mike will not remember either.
No, the problem with this is that since I don't write all these ideas I get with every episode, I don't write them down, and therefore I overwrite them again and again with every information. And if there is something I don't get new, if I have an idea and there's no new food for this idea, it kind of dies down in my head, and therefore, it's like not relevant anymore. Okay, on the side with it, and let's go somewhere else. And of course, just because I think something develops the way it does, I tend to doubt the ideas I have with stories, because most of the time I think no, this is if you get on this idea, it can't be how it will go, because this is way too obvious. maybe I have a wrong perspective on my ideas there, but usually it's like, no, you can't be on a writer or someone's idea how things develop.
I think this might also just be down to the fact that we grew up, I think, very much in an era where stories are being judged on being surprising more than anything, which I don't think is necessarily a fundamental, like, universal thing. I think they are like, similarly to how we've started to become extremely fond of cliffhangers and after credit scenes in our movies. Like, that is not a universal thing of qualityness. It's just something that for the past decade or two, many movies have done and many stories have done. I think this is also interesting to see, like, watching a 90s show, how much that perspective even holds, because I think there are many instances where we look at this and say, well, that's kind of an obvious mystery, but that might just be the fact that the writers never really intended for an audience to sit here and try and figure it out. It's much more about just, like you mentioned in your own first impressions, it's more about how things are being told that makes them compelling, not necessarily that you sit here and think, I didn't see that coming.
Yes, it's exactly, that's the problem also, I think, in newer productions, where it's where it's like we try to outsmart our watchers, our listeners, our readers, and therefore the story or the message itself is just on second, third, or even farther away places. And I think it's sad because it's no longer about we tell an interesting a story where you maybe even can learn something. It's just about, okay, let's shock, let's surprise.
I think outsmarting, yeah.
And also when you really just build a whole story or a whole season of a show or something always on surprise, it's kind of, I mean, it always depends on how the surprise is constructed, of course, but that's also kind of something that you cannot enjoy a second time, as probably, because then after you have everything, it kind of like puffs, and it's not so interesting anymore necessarily. I think there are plot lines that also surprise you and have a lot of twists, but that are written in a way that you can kind of follow around and see the big scenarios coming in a way that makes you follow along again and again and again,
It can also be that a twist recontextualizes everything, and then it's fun to watch again because it's
that
a new.
Can happen, yeah. That's a good constructed one, but it's not necessarily always the point.
Yeah.
I remember right now I read a book that had a really, really big twist in the end. I forgot its title and its author, but I'm quite sure because it's such a niche book, most won't read it anyway. Therefore, I'm spoilering. The point was it was a Japanese story, and there was a woman with her daughter, and her husband, her ex-husband, was killed, and everything that you were reading was like, oh my God, she killed him, and like she was trying to protect herself, which actually happened, but the neighbor said, I did it to protect her because he fell in love with this woman. And this was the big twist. You were the whole time you were thinking she did it, and it was it really was that way, but the twist was that in the end the neighbor said, I did it. And the way it was written, this is everything that I remember from this book. I don't remember the names. I don't remember what they were doing the whole time, or what did the woman work or the neighbor work. I just remember this twist, and that's everything that I'm keeping from this book. Like I already said, I don't even remember the title or the author, and the question therefore is, what is the meaning? Why do you write something like this? Because it's just some contemporary, and then it just goes away in your mind.
I mean, like you mentioned at the beginning, I think outsmarting is really a good way of putting it, where there are a lot of trends in writing, I think, that revolve just around breaking norms for the sake of doing it. I mean, we had a similar phenomenon spearheaded by Game of Thrones with this entire thing. Wow, we can just kill off main characters and subvert all the expectations. And I mean, for a while that's exciting and new, but it's like you're not doing that because no author ever before had the brilliant idea that also a key character could die. There's just good reasons why usually they don't, because usually you want to stick with characters that you've developed and cared about. And so just subverting that for the sake of doing it, as soon as it starts feeling random, kind of becomes stale very quickly. And I think that's what we run in here as well. So that's a whole big diatribe that we have on twists and turns and everything. But apart from the reveal that Talia is Control, we have the other big reveal, which I think might be even more relevant because it revolves around a much more important character, which is Susan is a telepath, a very weak one, and, not necessarily that she's going to start doing mind powers now, but that's a major part, like you mentioned, Layla, why she has always been so opposed against anything with telepaths. That is, I think, a reveal that for me recontextualizes a lot of things. Like when I go back and see how she interacts with all the telepaths that we had, when Mr. Grey comes to the station, for example, knowing now that she's constantly afraid of her secret coming out makes a lot more sense to me. Or otherwise, what she did might have felt more like there was some kind of prejudice there. And now I see there's a different, less surface level reason. And so I'm curious what you thought about this one.
Honestly, I like the idea overall, and it somewhat fits, but I don't think it perfectly fits. To me, it feels more like yes, someone was, we need to make this character or this plot more interesting. Let's add this. It doesn't feel as planned as other things, especially in this episode.
That is interesting. That is interesting, especially because they do kind of point out to you that there have been hints to this even in Sheridan's dream and such before, but I can see how it still feels maybe the most tacked on element of everything in this plot. But that's an interesting perspective, definitely.
I remember the dream somewhat, but I mean, we were talking what do these birds mean?
Yeah.
And yes, of course, there's this idea of, I think it's a raven or is it a crow? Doesn't matter, a black bird, therefore connection with witchcraft, with the second phase and stuff like that. But it's I'm not sure, doesn't feel as clear a hint to that, or it doesn't fit that good to me, because it's the the bird feels like such a random chosen symbol, and of course there's a lot of other meanings this can have. I think that I would have needed a bit more, maybe I'm too eager for clarity there.
I think it's just an interesting question to ask ourselves, what is our expectation as a viewer, right? Is this something that you would want to get kind of breadcrumbs throughout the first and a half seasons so that you can sit in this episode and be like, I knew it, she is a telepath, or is this something that you want to be surprised by, right? That's I think is interesting. What are our audience expectations about this?
I think also what you have to think about is what kind of consequences does this have, because even before, one of us reacted so emotional and intense towards any contact with telepath that any kind of authority person who is fond of her and wants to keep her would always care to protect her, and this kind of protection has now only been extended to, it might be even life-saving, but it was so intense that doesn't add that much to it, and that also, again, she's such a weak telepath, she herself says she's not even a P1, she's on this super, super low level, but they could still detect it. So she also doesn't have any secret ability that we could use. So it's kind of an information that could round up a lot of hints in a nice way, but it's not an information that I think we can use plot-wise so much in the future.
that's something that I'm actually a big fan of, that we kind of have this idea, hey, you are part of this marginalized group, and it doesn't give you superpowers.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's this idea like, no, it's just a burden at this point. And I mean, especially in her interactions with Sheridan, that does so much, because I do think like a big reason she is so hesitant to talk to him about this and stuff is because it is just bad news. It's just going to make things more complicated. There is no upside to this.
But what I meant was that maybe for that to then feel really rounded up and not just a little something extra that makes it more complicated but doesn't give us much, for that to round it more up, we would have probably needed a bit more clues, not necessarily more direct clues that we were sitting there, is she one or is she not, but maybe more and better constructed clues on what the hell is going on with her, so that it would be a bigger reveal, because it doesn't give us much for the future.
Okay.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe it's just something I didn't consider her to necessarily have. I mean, she has already so much problems mentally and of course with PsiCorps through her mother, what we've been told so far. It doesn't feel like she really needed this. I mean, yeah, and it doesn't it's not like I think it's like, oh, I'm surprised or I knew it. It's more like it doesn't feel as naturally.
Okay.
It's like it fits, yeah, like a bit more roughed in there.
Okay, that's interesting.
Maybe our dear lurkers have an opinion on this.
Oh, I can assure you they have. This is like one of these episodes that is much discussed, especially with regards to like how it came about.
Yeah, maybe I can tell. I mean, I'm in general not very good at guessing plot twists. Because that's why I'm always so impressed if people do that, because I don't do it. And I think the point is also when I'm writing myself, I don't plan plots, I plan other stuff and build the rest around. So I was completely surprised by that. I did not see it coming. I always thought all of her hatred for PsiCorps was already had good enough reasons, so I did not expect any more reveals. And I really sat there like, oh, I did not expect that at all the first time I watched it. So
I mean, that's also like for everyone, it's going to be a very subjective experience how that comes about. We kind of stand at this crossroads now. In which direction do we want to explore this main plot further? Do we want to go back to Lyta arriving on the station and going through PsiCorps' conspiracy first, and then discuss sort of the relationship between Susan and Talia a little more? Do we want to finish up that point first and then dive into the big part?
I would say maybe Talia and Susan.
Okay.
So, Meike, what do we think of their relationship? How many, or maybe we can try to recall it all together. How many seasons did we have before that gave the hint that something was developing between them?
I think it started just with season 2 that they were somewhat nice to each other.
And I have to say, I really missed Talia throughout season 2. She was really so not present anymore. And
well, at least she got more screen time than her Toth.
Yeah, that's something. But still, I really think that, this whole plot twist would have had such a bigger effect if she would have been more active. And so, I mean, how many episodes did she even have? Like every 3 episodes she was even visible. It was terrible.
We can definitely agree that she was not very present, and we had like a handful of scenes at most giving us any hint what there is. Like the bulk of any kind of development that they get is in this episode right here. Like they spend a good amount of time on that. This is why it is such a big point of discussion, but there's very little beforehand.
I think that's a pity.
The other side of this is, are we all on the same page what that relationship is, or do we have like diverse opinions on this? I'm just curious what your impressions are.
Who wants to start?
maybe before we dive into this, I have something to nag about, and that is the whole shower thing. Because with the girls' night, Talia is taking a shower at Ivanova's quarters, and when she reappears, she has the wet hair and makeup on. Are you fucking kidding me?
It's
Really,
face
this is-
makeup.
And the makeup sits. I mean, it would be good if it would be what?
Yeah, honestly, which kind of woman comes from the shower with wet hair and has a full makeup on?
We are
Really?
in the 90s.
This just explains to you what kinds of girls' nights she was expecting if she took a shower and then took the time to not dry her hair but put the makeup back on.
Yes, I'm
That's
sorry,
just the
but I
priorities that
really
she
have-
has.
This annoyed me so much because it's again. I mean,
But I think
Yeah, well,
Susan, it's okay. She's usually more of a really subtle makeup for the filming, but it's not like she looks like she's wearing makeup. But here with Talia, I mean, this red lipstick. I'm sorry. And later she sleeps with this. A little bit of realism, a little bit.
I want to say something to that shower point, because what we also get in this scene is that only the command staff has real water showers. The other people have to have some kind of weird dry space shower. So I guess a big advice for being on Babylon 5 would actually be to date someone from the command staff, and to date them in a way that allows you access to the shower, so they have to do kind of dirty stuff to you so that you can sometimes get the shower. That was my big takeaway from that scene. I'm sorry.
that's great that this is your takeaway.
Yeah.
I mean, I think
Question: Does Garibaldi have a normal shower? Otherwise, I would
Yeah.
totally go to him. Okay, let's have a deal. You and me, we are watching cartoons every time you want, and I can use your shower. I'm sure he would be in.
you will go for this. No, but I think it's good that you point this out, this entire makeup shenanigans, because this is our kind of indicator how deep in the 90s we are. Like, we are this deep in the 90s that we are saying it is impossible to show this woman without makeup after she takes a shower. Like, I can do the dirty laugh, but that's legitimately like the concern that they have. Like, we can't do this. This is just against the norm, which makes it obviously kind of significant that we have potentially a relationship happening there, which is what we were talking about, right? And I mean, for me, this is a relevant indicator, because I would judge this relationship very much by just imagining if I replace either Susan or Talia with a guy, would there be any question that what is indicated here is a romantic relationship? I would think not. Like, it is completely true that you can have two women who share an apartment and, you know, who see each other in bathrobes and it's just a close friendship. But in 90s TV, that is just not something that is portrayed. In 90s TV, it is very clearly coded that if you had a guy and a girl like this in a scene, it would be 100% assured for everybody watching this that they are having an intimate relationship of sorts. And this is how I would interpret this scene as well, that this is very much indicating like we are using all the language short of having an actual kiss scene in this 90s TV show to say, hey guys, these girls are having a relationship.
I actually wasn't sure until the scene where they slept in one bed.
I mean, that's you know, if to drive the point home.
Yeah, but there I was sure. Before that, I was insecure.
Okay.
But we have
Yeah,
this
because
vibe.
honestly, it's always the question where in these kind of moments, is this just bad acting, or are they trying to give a message there? Because I mean, I sometimes I've seen things where it's just, yeah, okay, this and this is what is happening there, and later you realize no, it wasn't, because it was just acted badly. But I mean, they're standing. It starts with they're standing quite close. The way Talia touches Susan on, you don't really see where she is touching her, if it's the arm or whatever, but it doesn't look like what you do with a friend.
Yeah.
And yeah, when they are sleeping and Talia is like going like, it's not like this with your hand touching, but slowly crossing over the sheets. what kind of friend do this? Maybe I have a wrong understanding of
No,
friendship,
this is-
but I wouldn't look this way for a friend that's sleeping in my bed.
And
So-
I think this is also what I mean. Like, of course, you can argue that, friends have sleepovers and stuff as well, but in TV, there is a deliberate message that is being sent with these kinds of gestures. And I think this is one where it points much more towards the kind of romantic side than not, which for me is just significant because we are in the 90s, we are having a sci-fi show, so of course there's going to be a debate like, is this one of the great moments where science fiction once again ascends the bounds of social norms and shows us a little bit more of queerness in TV than is usually the case, which in this case, yes, it is, but it also means that there's going to be endless discussions about these scenes.
I mean, but there's also a thing that the clueless lesbian is just really a true problem. Like, honestly, it's actually also when you read about experiences like that, it's always very, very difficult level when you get romantic with a woman. I'm saying that as someone who also dated girls in the past, it's definitely just as difficult as discussions about these scenes are.
Yeah, I mean, nobody's arguing that. It's just...
So I just like that because it just reflects reality. It's fucking difficult. Yeah.
Yeah, I think sure, I'm totally with you there. I think why it is done the way we see it now is just because if you would have made it more obvious at this time, there might have been a problem.
Yeah.
I mean, this is if you had at this time two women like kissing or have a really obvious relationship, a romantic relationship, I think there would have been a problem with TV, especially in the US.
Yeah, probably. I mean, if we had gotten a kiss, it would probably have been cut out of the final cut anyway.
I mean, we are in this era where the first same-sex kisses are happening on sci-fi shows, although usually with some kind of cop-out where you can say, oh, one of them was possessed by a energy spirit that is actually a woman, or there's a symbiont in there that has like a different personalities and such. It
Or it was an alien.
Yeah, of sorts. Like here it is very much, no, these are just like their relationship is not the point of the episode at any point. So this would have made it, I think, a lot more iffy for a production company or for a studio to put out.
Another thing that we have to discuss here, I think also in connection to the big reveal in the end, is that nowadays there's often a trope discussed as problematic in the queer community in general, and when the LGBTQ community, basically, that there is this tendency to kill your lesbians, to kill your queers. Like when you have a queer, homosexual, whatever couple, that's always the one ending up unlucky. I'm not a big fan of that discussion in general, actually, because I think that if you take that away from a group to be portrayed like that, then you also take away their ability to portray their struggles. Because if they need a happy ending or if they cannot die throughout a story, then a lot of stories that actually happen in the real world cannot be told. So in general, I'm kind of skeptical about it, and I'm never mad if I read a book about a bisexual character who has bad luck or dies or has a rough fate, because that's often how it is. But I think we should mention that point and maybe discuss it. So maybe give it some thought on why is it the lesbian couple that has this bad luck, and why are we only introduced to our only lesbian couple really like minutes before it goes wrong? I think that for today's standards would be a bit more problematic.
It's definitely something that would be discussed, although we should make a clear distinction here between... It mainly becomes a problem when the writer is making a decision to do so, whereas in this episode, this is largely due to outside circumstances, because Talia was never supposed to leave the show at this point. This is, I mentioned at the beginning, JMS is kind of pulling all the strings to make things work here, because as we've all mentioned, Talia wasn't really in this season, and that is something that the actress was not very happy about, and which is, at least, based on hearsay, one of the big reasons that she decided to leave the show at this point. And so she's gone, and so somebody has to decide how to deal with this, and this is why we get this entire plot about her leaving.
But why do we get the romance then right before she leaves?
Well, this is the question. Like, is this the author deciding, oh, they're gonna die anyway. I guess I can safely insert a lesbian relationship now and they're gonna die anyway. Or is this him saying, dang it, these characters that I always had a relationship planned for are dead now, so I'm gonna take my chance to squeeze this in. A short relationship is better than none. Like, this is very much then up to interpretation. Like, is this a positive or a negative thing?
Like I said, I'm not in general a big fan of this problematic view on stories either, but I just thought it was something to bring up. And here definitely the circumstances of the writing are important, because nothing was planned like that. And yeah, but what I also think is that this way, that for me at least always is a romance or a plot twist that I always remember. Like, I always remember the first moment I watched this moment where Talia flipped over and I was like, oh my god, what? Why? So yeah, I think that really this short-lived relationship kind of really, or I would assume also for the first people who watch it on TV, kind of really lived on in the memories. And that's actually a cool thing, I think, that they have this iconic moment, although it was so short.
I think
Maybe one way it makes her leaving more sad, I would think, because there was finally not just to the point between her and Ivanova of okay, I can accept that you are a telepath and we can be friends. No, it's even more. I open even more up to you, and the betrayal feels more horrid in the way it is happening. And honestly, the where Ivanova is going the last time in Talia's quarters, this is really, you really see how much pain she's feeling in this situation, how much of her feelings and what's destroyed in her through Talia's actions, and of course how strongly Talia has changed. How much different this new personality is.
I think it really brings home this point, just how absolutely ruthless the PsiCorps is, where, you know, she even has this discussion that calls into question, like, was any of this real? Like, did Talia ever have real feelings for Susan, or was this just the whisperings of this other personality in her ear? Personally, I'm pretty convinced that Control is just saying this to hurt Susan at this point because she's being a bitch, but it definitely shows you that PsiCorps is 100% going to utilize everything against you, including these feelings. And yeah, I think the whole demeanor in this final scene also brings home this point that the Talia that we see at the end of this episode is just a constructed personality. This is completely different. Like, the moment the flip is switched, the Talia that we knew has died, which is very unfortunate.
Yeah. I also always have to think about the fact there that this is another personal relationship of Susan's that has been completely destroyed by PsiCorps, and it's not the first one. Her family has already separated enough from that, and now this relationship has also been destroyed by this organization. So there, the personal relationship to that has become much more intense, I think. And also, to come back to that point that I had made before about this kill your queers problematic, what, especially for a time where lesbian couples were not so common on TV, I think it's also interesting that they had a lot of problems. They had a lot of problems from being born into different kind of like camps in human society at that point, and from all of the problems that they had, none of them had to do with their sexual orientation of any kind. So we are still very close to a time where that would have been the biggest problem and the biggest secret that they had to keep, and it just completely doesn't matter at all anymore. It's about so many new things. I think that's also a strong message here.
That's the famous utopia of Babylon 5. Everything is terrible, but not for the same reasons. Congratulations.
Yes, and I mean, it is important to kind of show that this doesn't matter. We have a lot of other fucked up things. And I think that especially at the time in the 90s, that probably was important to show. Are there any more points to the relationship of Susan and Talia that you would like to make?
I mean, the one thing, if we're talking about how sudden this comes about, I think if there's any character that I would understand seeing in a relationship with basically no build-up to it, it would be Ivanova, because she is a very private person, right? Like, if we see her usually at work, I don't expect, Talia coming by and, like, sending her some kisses or something like that. Like, she's this very strict person. And I love the fact that she is still this very strict person. Ivanova started out as this completely military career woman who is not very emotional, who is very buttoned up. And we've seen now, again and again, that she is all that, but outside of that, she also has a private side where she's getting emotional, making friends, getting into relationships, wearing the flimsy, fancy dresses and little pajamas and everything. So it's not this typical cliche, which I think especially in 90s TV you still have a lot, that if you have a career woman that defines her entire life and she has to kind of, suppress her female urges, otherwise she could not be successful in the harsh male masculine work life. Like, we've been watching Desperate Housewife recently, so that's a big topic in there. But no, here I like to see that, it's perfectly possible to have this character that just kind of does both and has a rich private life and a very professional career. And these things are just very separate for her. And yeah, I'm very happy to see that.
Honestly, this scene you just described of Talia coming by and blowing kisses to Ivanova, honestly, I really love this. I think it will keep living rent-free in my head now.
Just sending them telepathically, so you just see Ivanova like directing traffic and blushing a little bit. It would be very cute.
Yeah. So I think then we are done with this relationship.
Yeah, that's pretty much all. It was a pretty harsh breakup.
Yeah, that's one of the harder ones, yeah. Yeah, my brain just got stuck at Susan has a private life, because I still don't think that Susan has a private life, because it always goes wrong and family is dead. But I think we definitely see her as someone who exists outside of a uniform.
Yes.
Which describes it a lot better, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Having a private and family life does not tell anything about how successful that is.
No, but I also thought about the other lover that came back to the station.
Yeah, that was
then it was the terrorist, which is also not so successful. But yeah, definitely someone who exists outside of it. Actually, maybe I don't know if we maybe we already talked about that somewhere in season 1. I can't tell, but I was surprised at first when Susan was introduced why her character had. Okay, this is maybe a little bit superficial, but why her character had such long hair, because I would have expected a short-haired, tough, typical military character that you have a lot in sci-fi, and we see her right in the first episode. We see her with long and open hair and her dress at the bar, and I was at first really surprised that they had her like that she would tie it back and be completely functional, and then she had this, and I completely didn't expect that, definitely. Yeah.
I mean, maybe we're just more used to the other sci-fi kind of tough girl from Star Trek, which is short hair, but you put her in a skin-tight bodysuit to make up for it. So that's kind of the only options we had at the time.
Or maybe it's just that I was more into Stargate at the time, and I always saw Sam in front of my eyes, and I always figured that's how these women look, all of them.
Maybe.
Well, I always think that if you have like someone who is fighting physical, that it's sort of handy if you have short hair, because it doesn't get in your way. And yeah, I mean, I think Sam was like that, even though she was mostly there for her scientific expertise. She was still on the fighting lines, and in this construction, it's like, yeah, Ivanova doesn't have to go out fight barehanded, at least not on the daily basis. So she can have the luxury. I don't want to say it's not possible to have a long hair if you're in military and are active fighting. I personally just think, for me, it would be more handy, because I'm lazy as fuck in these regards. So
it's just kind of an indicator that she clearly has personal priorities and made it a priority to have the long hair, which is, like, regardless of fighting, it's just a time investment that she's going to have. Like, it's just going to be then a little bit of extra hassle every time she goes out. But all right, talking about the tough woman of this show, maybe we should start talking like 1.5 hours into this podcast. We should start talking about Lyta Alexander properly, who is actually like the driving force of this entire plot. And she comes to the station, and Mike, you already mentioned being very glad that she's back. I feel very much the same. I like Talia a lot. I like Lyta a hell of a lot more. Even just in this episode, she's such just a force to reckon with. And immediately from the moment she wakes up, she just basically cleans house. It's great. And I also love that she is on her own little like adventure quest where Babylon 5 is really just one pit stop, because she is actually on a quest to visit the Warlords and meet the aliens and stuff, which is just so interesting. I wish we could have like follow her plot for a little bit. I don't care what happens to the station. I want to see her space adventures.
Yeah, I would totally be with you there, because yeah, she is charismatic in her own way. She has her own agenda, and she has her principles. She is like, okay, even though this is, I mean, she's saying she ran from PsiCorps and just happened to land on Mars, and okay, I have to make some money, so who will pay me? The revolutionaries. But
Yes.
at the same time, she's like, okay, I have this information here. This is dangerous for the revolutionaries, the people on B5. I have to do something about this, and therefore, even though I'm risking my life, I go to B5 and I will be the one who will deal with this problem in the way I can. But she is going there, and we see with her arrival, she doesn't get there unscattered.
And I think it's interesting, like, we had this entire talk about Talia and how much there is development to move away from Earth a little bit. And it's interesting that we meet Lyta back here in exactly the same footing as our crew, where she's very critical of Earth and is basically already going rogue. And her entire journey to this point was completely different to anything that our crew undertook. She has had her entire own journey, and it feels very much like ever since she had her mind connection with Kosh, she's been just following a higher calling and doing something completely different. But I like that we get to have this meeting of like many people coming together, and they are all on the same page, even though they haven't gone through exactly the same thing, and they just kind of have to communicate that with each other, which is, makes all of these interactions early on between them so tense.
I don't know why, but it kind of reminded of the episode with the Holy Grail. With I forgot his name, but yeah.
Essentially our seeker for the Grail, right? Gotcha.
Yes, I don't know. It kind of feels similar.
I
A
think
bit in points, maybe.
if we had time to talk with Dylan about her arrival on the station, I can imagine that Dylan would see in her a true seeker as well. A much more aggressive one, more dangerous, in much less need of assistance, but a seeker nonetheless. I think that's true.
Yeah, her arrival was always very intense. I also have to say that the arrival of Lyta at this point actually seems well constructed to me. I mean, we know that was also kind of an unplanned thing. Like,
She got replaced.
we did want to lose Lyta after the pilot, but it happened, and that's why we had Talia. But still, that have this character who had a completely different journey and then comes back is very interesting, and also is something that can happen in TV shows. So I'm not like, oh, here we see an emergency solution, but it seems well fitting to me. What I find interesting about the news that she brings is actually that we've talked about what kind of person can PsiCorps get hold of and do such a procedure. And we found our option of people very limited, and it had to be someone who was closely in touch with with PsiCorps, because she also said that it involved a lot of medication and things like that. So why did no one ever consider that it could be her? Because she had the password, it would have activated her. But still, she could have been control herself and just had a bigger plan.
Yes, of course.
And I don't know, I found that actually just this, because while I watched the episode, I actually didn't think about it, but right now, I just find it interesting that we have her. She scans, years ago she scanned Kosh, then she was brought back to Earth, then PsiCorps had dealings with her, and now she is on this super weird quest and now gives us that information. Like, it could have also been very reasonable to just lock her up, because right, you know what I mean?
That's where we're talking about Garibaldi's gut feeling again, right?
Yeah, I think what was the important point for me was her involvement with Kosh. I mean, so far we started with him being like a troll, and then he developed into some sort of ancient sacred being with, I don't know, a magic touch, and this kind of gave it to me that okay, Lyta is on the good side, just because everyone that is friendly connected with Kosh has this kind of development for the greater good, or however you want to phrase that.
We still see Kosh as a kind of protector. We still think Kosh is on our side, and whatever mystery is going on, if someone has this connection to him, then everything's going to be fine. Yeah, that's true.
And I mean, at the very least, if she's invoking his name as kind of a reason to trust her, right, you would think, even if he's just looking out for his own interests, he would have something to say about that if she wasn't, telling the truth in some way. So there's definitely something to that. I think another big part of this is also that our crew is kind of just sitting there and being like, well, I guess let her do her thing as long as we are all there and looking at it. Like, I guess it's better to humor her than try and just lock her up. It's kind of this entire situation is sprung on them so quickly that I think they don't have much time to develop a more coherent plan. But I'm glad that Garibaldi's first solution isn't to lock everybody up. He likes to do that so often, so I'm glad that he's...
Yeah, well, I think the overall solution to prove Lyta's words, or back up the message she's bringing, I personally doesn't consider it something tricky or dangerous. I mean, she is saying like I don't scan people, I don't look into your mind, I just it feels, the way it's explained, it feels like she's just throwing, I don't know, imagine a cotton ball or something, if you need a picture, throwing that at people, and either they react or they don't. So there is no harm done, and your personal being, privacy, whatever, not really damaged or even touched in any way. So
I mean, the other big thing is that she comes to the station through the channels of the revolution and immediately basically tells them, hey guys, you have this conspiracy going on, I need to help you protect this. So at the very least, Sheridan can also say, okay, if she is control and they already have all of this figured out, I guess we're done here anyway. We don't have much to lose at this point. So I guess this is also part of them. So, but yeah, it's definitely...
I think the only valid reason to say I don't want this to happen is what Ivanova is saying. I mean, she is in a position where she can be discovered as a telepath, and but yeah, that's the only reason I personally would consider to be a valid reason to say no, because on every other version there is nothing happening to you, and if you are the sleeper, then well, hell, it will happen anyway.
And I mean, it's this thing where Ivanova has good reason to say no. They say no, and Lyta says, okay, I guess I'm gonna do it to a million other people first, even though, like, practically it makes no sense, but she humors them in that. So just also, gonna give her a lot of credit because she's willing to go along with this and go the more complicated route.
Yeah, so what were you thinking? What were you all thinking of the reaction Garibaldi had when he was...
I mean, I thought it interesting that he gave away his weapon before she started. I mean, it's a smart move. If he would have been the one, he could have used the weapon and started shooting like Talia later was trying. But yeah, honestly, I'm not sure if I wouldn't have reacted the same way.
I think for him it's a perfect encapsulation of his character. He's the guy who watches Daffy Duck and has a lot of fun, but he also has the serious presence of mind to be like, okay, seriously guys, just in case, take my gun and then I can have fun, but please don't shoot me immediately.
Honestly, if I would have been his colleague of any kind and I would have been in the room, I would not have been talking to him for a week or so. I think it's just a short man.
Very personally. Yeah.
If I would have been there, I also would have. I think I would have started hitting him. Not in a hurting way, but just to get out some frustration, energy.
Yeah, I think it just shows he's probably out of all of them the one who is most used to dealing with tense situations like this. If he deals with crime and down below and stuff, so he's just built. He has different coping mechanisms for this kind of thing than them.
But yeah, maybe we should talk about the overall idea of this sleeper program, because honestly, this is like the wet dream of every spy, and especially if I think back to the Cold War and situations like that. Yeah.
I think for me this falls once again into this category where I didn't know this existed before. But now that you tell me this exists, it makes perfect sense. Like, in the very beginning of Season 1, Ironheart tells us the telepaths aren't interested in big stuff, they're interested in small, in subtle stuff. Alright, good, I know that. Then we get to meet Mr. Bester and how vicious the PsiCorps is, and yeah, I can see how ruthless they would be in doing that. Then we had an entire episode of them reconstructing dead people and implanting rudimentary personalities in them. So they have been experimenting with this kind of stuff for a little while. We've learned also that, erasing people's personality is a type of capital punishment that the Earth Alliance does. So all the technologies and all the stuff has already been in place. So now if they come up to me and talk to me about this is how we make control, yeah, honestly, I'm not that surprised. It kind of makes sense. It is something that they would do. I guess the biggest limitation, like you mentioned, Layla, is that they need somebody that they have access to for a prolonged amount of time. So they can't just randomly insert anybody with this. But other than that, yeah, it's a wet dream.
But also, if you think about what does it mean to have this access to a person, you can actually argue that there is a situation on Earth definitely where PsiCorps gets access to a lot of people through their medical data, for example, or also just through your general physicians. They are in touch with pediatricians to get the telepathic children scan out there very early. So I could even imagine that they get to someone through their, dentist or something. So they can manage a lot of things.
Yeah.
And maybe to add one thing that I find the most extreme about this control thing is that, and I don't know, maybe that's even a necessity that they cannot pull it off in another way yet, but that the original personality actually has to die. So it's not that you can have someone who you activate, that there is this new personality, and then you can deactivate that again. You can put it to sleep again and the real person is back. No, you have to kill off that other person. I could think that maybe it in the universe even has some physical reasons, if you have all of these new synapses and connections in place, you cannot just cut them back again, probably something like that. But I think that adds a new kind of extreme to it.
It fits this idea that all of this is kind of experimental technology that they're messing about with, right?
Yes, and it is also super extreme that you actually cannot take it back. I find that because these kind of obsession things from a lot of fantasy sci-fi settings, but that it is so definite that it cannot be undone. That's rough.
I mean, you already mentioned, Alex, the government side, that it's used as a punishment. And I think the process and the overall idea is exactly the same. The one personality dies to make place for another one. Just that there are, in the beginning, existing two personalities. One is sleeping, and if this one finally awakens, the other has to leave.
I think it's also this thing where I guess they're intentionally leaving us a bit in the dark about also the details, like how far developed is this? Is this control like the latest and greatest, or is like a new generation of them already on the way? I guess this is the sad thing that we are left with. But if we're talking about this being irreversible, of course, there is a small little caveat to this, where at the very end of the episode, we do get yet another flashback to Kosh basically taking a reading of Talia with his little vicar friend. So at least there is this hint that if you have access to a Vorlon, maybe it is not 100% irreversible.
Yes, he took, kind of like he put her personality on a stick just in case.
Yeah, I mean, he called it something like reflections, basically a contingency just in case. So I would not be surprised, let's say, like given how this scene is shown in this episode again, if he knew about her control personality and if he decided to, take his own measures.
Yeah.
It's a nice, but also quite scary idea if you think about it. I think there was a game like this where personality could be uploaded into like a robotic mechanism. The problem was that it couldn't be deleted. You could pass it on to another robotic version, but it was a copy. The other one still kept existing, which was quite freaky.
Always this idea, like it's a coin flip, which stream of conscience you end up with. Like you're either the guy who is in the new spacesuit and gets to go on, or who is just left in the old chair to rot. It's kind of a sad
exactly.
thing. Lyta's entire journey is kind of done with the big reveal of control. Like this, she doesn't stick around to clean up any of this mess. She's just like, oh, that just kind of sucks for you guys. I'm off on my space quest fighting the Morlons, though. She does have this last encounter with Kosh, though, where Kosh is very happy to undress for her, for lack of a better word. Once again, if she wasn't a weird energy being, this would have a very different energy, this entire thing.
And there was, Meike, we talked... No, we talked about that already. Always when Kosh opens his encounter suit, there is a hint about what people see, and it was in this scene again. Just saying.
It's true.
I also didn't get it the first time. I kept telling me, and I was like, "What hint? What is it? I don't get it. Where is it?"
Maybe you want to point it out because I'm afraid my version, the version I watched from this episode, was quite bad in quality. There were
shouldn't matter. It's an audio cue.
Okay, then I didn't listen properly.
That's fine. You will. It's one of these things where we tease it now, and then once it's revealed, it's gonna be a real grown-up. We're like, oh, yeah, that was very clever. Take your cookie. Good thing. I got tricked again. It's one of these reveals, but don't worry. It's gonna happen sooner or later.
Yeah, so what does this mean that Kosh undresses for her? Is it like oh my god, words. Sorry, my brain hurts. What is it? Is it not a treat?
It's a real treat for her, seeing him naked, finally. A reward.
A reward, yeah. Sorry, is it a reward or is it like a how do we interpret that scene? That's what I'm asking.
I think
honestly my brain was like, no, we don't want to think about this one. You can post it from Meike. We don't want to deal with this now. No, because honestly, this can be everything, like some in the sense of some sacred revelation or in the sense of what it what drives her, what keeps her going, or is this just some kind of hope, like if okay, why are you laughing? What did I say?
Some secret revelation.
No, not like that. Not like that. I mean,
We're not in the Catholic Church here.
she's not underage. Why does this even matter? This is
I mean, compared to his age, we don't know.
no deal. No, but I think like we don't have to talk about this, in these concrete terms of what specifically is she seeing here. What I think we do learn already is that this seems more profound than Vorlon's just being cagey and being like, I don't want anybody seeing me, and if somebody sees me, I am getting mad. Thank you. I am getting mad about this. It seems much more like, even in cases where the Vorlon is absolutely fine with this, like I don't think Kosh has any problem with her scanning him when he was on a deathbed. I think, they are on an amenable relationship right now, so he was happy about that. I also don't think that Kosh had any problem helping the doctor who spent a night on his ship in a big cocoon. He just insisted that he's in a coma. So for me, it seems like when a human touches a Vorlon or sees a Vorlon or scans a Vorlon, an completely unchangeable new connection is made, and that connection isn't voluntary. The Vorlon can't help that, and the human can't help that. So even in cases where Vorlon is completely fine with this, it is this complete danger, which to me just means if Kosh is revealing himself to Lyta, this isn't about him, delivering a specific message to her or something. It is like embracing this fundamental connection that they have now. It's something more connected to his basic nature, rather than him delivering a specific message to her.
You mean it's more like I don't know, a hug between good friends?
Yeah, maybe something like that. It's maybe her ship is singing to him or something like that. It's just, it is not like
Sorry. I'm so sorry.
some dirty mind. It can't be helped. Anyway, this is Lyta's entire side of the story. We talked about Susan's side of the story. Do we want to talk about how Sheridan handles all of this, specifically with, him having to deal not only with Lyta arriving, but also with his first in command being a telepath?
Is there so much to talk about?
I think it is. I mean, I don't know if there's much to talk about, but I think it's significant for the kind of relationship they're having. I think, Sheridan is a new commander on the station, but this is really showcasing him from a different side. I think usually he's the very Boy Scout, cheery, smiley kind of dude who is in good terms with everyone, but this is him being very serious and being also upset, why didn't you tell me about this, and having to work through all of this. I think that's just a significantly different side of this commander that we've usually not seen yet.
Yes, but I think considering the situation, I mean, he could have been far more negatively energetic there, more accusing her in the sense of, yeah, you didn't trust me, and now I can't trust you. This kind of train, but he didn't. He's asking this once, why didn't you? And then it's okay, we handled this. It's still okay, we are doing this together. I'm not leaving you alone. I'm here for you. We got this. And I think this is admirable to see, because this is not something anyone can do, and especially in his position, because this means he has another weak spot.
Yes.
On Babylon 5 in a way. And on the other hand, but before all this Ivanova interaction, I found it rather funny to see where he was complaining to Dylan that why is it every time things turn out good, the next bad thing stands in front of my door. And this was also so relatable, because yeah, I totally feel you there, boy.
I mean, this is where we go coming full circle, and this brings us back to the relationship of those two that we've started talking about at the beginning of this episode, which has got around us up very nicely. But yeah, this entire episode we started talking about this about trust. You know, how do you trust people? How do you deal with this? And we see very much here, I think, this chain that Sheridan can be this touchstone for Susan and can be so relaxing because he has somebody else to complain to afterwards and before. And I think Dylan is very much becoming this. And we do kind of see that their relationship has made quite a jump because, yeah, the death of an entire civilization is a good opportunity for trauma bonding. So obviously, after last time's episode, they're gonna be much closer. And yeah, once again, for me, it's just them having a teenage romance. Like when you have them like laughing on the fact that Dylan doesn't know what the word "but" means. It's very silly, but it's very cute. So I'm not mad at it.
And I have to say, I'm shipping these two. It's something I couldn't do with Sinclair and Dylan.
Oh,
because I mean, there were moments where you could have forced this, like, oh yeah, they certainly like each other. There's going to be a romance. And that they are in this connection. That I would have said no. This doesn't feel right. This doesn't fit. But those two, I think they're, in a way, two of a kind.
There's a different level of chemistry between these two where I think it lends itself very much to it. And I think for me, this also has a lot to do with the position that Dylan is in now compared to the position that Dylan had in season 1. I think I would have had a much harder time, even with Sheridan, seeing a relationship between Satai Dylan, the leader of the Minbari, and this human commander. But the Dylan that, has gone through this change is, I think, a very different kind of character, and for this relationship works much better.
Yeah, actually, I have to say that I don't even remember Sheridan managing this situation that much. I feel like he's just in this chaos, trying to navigate, like, do I go left or right now? I don't know. Let's talk about this. I see him very much like that. What I was actually wondering about is why he did not immediately promise Susan, even before he had all of the information, promised Susan that they would test a lot of people before they test her.
Is it possible that you had a completely different conversation as us right now?
We were talking about Sheridan.
Yeah, and Dylan.
The situation.
Okay, sure.
Sorry, I was just following around, but I had your original question in mind.
Okay.
So why he did not promise that immediately? Why it had to be the big reveal for him to promise that? Because I think it's, even without knowing that, it would have made sense to say, okay, so we have a list of people that are the most likely, and then we have a list of people that are also still likely, and at some point we will have to test you, but we will test a lot of important people before that.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I felt a bit slow, but it actually fits to how I just described Sheridan, that he's just in this chaos. Being like, okay, which turn do I take? And that's also what kind of how he reflects on that later with Dylan, I think, because it's just like, yeah, that was a mess, but now it's over. Yeah. Sorry, I did not say much more to you shipping them too. I was just still stuck on your original question.
That's fine. We will read an Eye on Minbari about it in the near future. It's fine.
Maybe to go back to the beginning on a short note, the newspaper is called Universe Today.
Yes.
What a fucking arrogant name. Because I mean, it's like we know everything that is happening in the universe, and we are telling you everything.
It's journalism. I don't know what else you want from them. Listen, every single newspaper is gonna claim that they are speaking the truth and for everybody, and they are the pulse of the people. It's
well, you don't have to put it in your name.
Maybe it's actually Centauri publication. I could believe that very easily, and it's just a German, not a German, a human transcript of that exists. It's also a German version. Listen, the arrogance of people, right? But I think by and large, this is everything we have. Like, you're already on different topics anyway. I don't know, Meike, if you have anything else that has to do with the main thing, though. I think we're pretty much grilled and overcooked in our attic here. So, is there any question that we would use as a lurker question coming out of all of this? It could be something about, were these twists for you after 30 years of enjoying this show? Are you still surprised about to learn about this?
I would say I would be really interested about the whole Talia Ivanova relationship. What is the quintessential everyone is taking there? Is it a romantic relationship, or are they living in denial? Maybe on, since we spent so much time on the question of how important it is to have some surprise in a story plot, how they feel about that. Is it important? And maybe especially to this episode, would you think this is needed there, or is it perfectly the way it was? Or did it surprise you? Maybe something along those lines.
I think that's very interesting, especially in Babylon 5, because it is a 30-year-old show, and still people, I think, in this community put a lot of emphasis on the idea that newcomers should try and enjoy the show with as little spoilers as possible. So even though, this is a fan base that is generally rewatching this show many, many times and thinks this show is very valuable on a rewatch, even if you know everything that happens, there's still the sense that your first watch through is going to be special because you don't know many of the twists and turns that come up. So, yeah, that would be interesting to hear more from our lurkers about how we weigh kind of the importance of that. In this case, who wants to do an outro? I'm looking at you expectantly.
No tapestry?
No, we already decided weeks ago that the tapestry is going to be something that we do as special episodes near the end of seasons to kind of follow through everything that is. But I think we end up talking about the big connections as part of the main discussion often enough that I think this is fine.
Okay. So, how do I start? Okay.
No, ending is Don't start the synopsis again, please. We can't.
So this was it for today. You can follow us on Facebook, where we have our own discussion group. We are on Instagram, on Twitter. We are on Mastodon, although we are not really alive there still. We are Third Age Podcast everywhere. You can also find us on YouTube and you can also find us anywhere where there are podcasts. And of course, here on YouTube, we're the cutest because here you can see us.